The Sermon on the Mount is one of the most profound and influential discourses in Christian theology, found in Matthew chapters 5 through 7. It is where Jesus outlines the values and principles of the kingdom of heaven. This sermon not only addresses moral and ethical behavior, but also emphasizes the importance of inward spiritual transformation. Here's a more detailed breakdown. After gaining followers from various regions of Galilee, Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and beyond the Jordan, as mentioned in Matthew chapter 4, verse 25, Jesus ascends a mountain and sits down, adopting the traditional posture of a Jewish rabbi preparing to teach. His disciples and the crowd gather around to listen as he begins what would become one of the most well-known discourses in Christian history. The Beatitudes, found in Matthew chapter 5, verses 3 to 12, open the sermon with a series of blessings, pronouncing divine favor on various groups of people. Each statement begins with blessed, which can be understood as fortunate or happy, but in a spiritual sense indicating those who experience God's approval and presence. Blessed are the poor in spirit, those who recognize their spiritual poverty and need for God are promised the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who grieve over sin, and suffering will be comforted by God. Blessed are the meek. The meek are those who are humble and gentle, and they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. People who passionately seek righteousness will find satisfaction in God's justice and goodness. Blessed are the merciful. Those who show mercy to others will themselves receive mercy from God. Blessed are the pure in heart, those whose hearts are undivided and pure in their devotion to God will see him. Blessed are the peacemakers. Those who strive for reconciliation and peace will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Those who suffer for living righteously will inherit the kingdom of heaven. Jesus concludes with encouragement for those who are insulted or persecuted because of their faith, promising them great reward in heaven. Jesus uses two metaphors, salt and light, to describe the role of his followers in the world, as found in Matthew chapter 5, verses 13 to 16. Salt of the earth, salt preserves and adds flavor. Jesus teaches that his followers are to preserve goodness in a corrupt world and bring the distinctive flavor of godliness to society. However, if salt loses its saltiness, it becomes useless, just as Christians who fail to live out their faith lose their impact. Light of the world. Light illuminates and guides. Christians are to be visible examples of goodness, shining their light before others so that their good deeds point people toward God. This call is to live a life of open witness and integrity, not hiding one's faith. Jesus declares that he has not come to abolish the law or the prophets, but to fulfill them. This means he upholds the Torah's moral and ethical requirements and brings them to their intended purpose. Jesus emphasizes the permanence of the law, stating that not a single letter or stroke will pass away until everything is accomplished. His followers are called to obey the law more deeply than the Pharisees and teachers of the law, whose observance is often external and legalistic. This section sets the stage for what follows as Jesus reinterprets the law in a way that focuses on the spirit rather than mere external obedience. Jesus intensifies the law by addressing matters of the heart. He contrasts traditional interpretations of the law with his deeper, more demanding application. On anger, Jesus explains that anger, like murder, brings judgment. He teaches that reconciliation is crucial, urging his followers to settle disputes quickly to avoid the consequences of unresolved conflict. Anger and contempt are spiritually destructive. On lust, Jesus extends the commandment against adultery, saying that even looking at someone with lust is equivalent to committing adultery in the heart. This highlights the importance of purity in thought, not just action. On divorce. While the Mosaic law allowed divorce under certain conditions, Jesus limits it, permitting divorce only in cases of sexual immorality. He emphasizes the sanctity of marriage and its indissoluble nature. On oaths, Jesus calls for truthfulness in speech. Rather than swearing by heaven, earth, or anything else to prove their honesty, believers should be so truthful that their simple yes or no is sufficient. This reflects a life of integrity and sincerity. In one of the most challenging sections, Jesus teaches non-retaliation and radical love. Turn the other cheek instead of seeking revenge when wronged. Jesus calls for a response of nonviolence. This doesn't mean passivity, but choosing forgiveness over retaliation. Go the extra mile. Roman soldiers could compel civilians to carry their gear for a mile. Jesus urges his followers to go beyond what is required, demonstrating a spirit of generosity and self-sacrifice. Love your enemies. Jesus turns cultural norms upside down by commanding his followers to love their enemies and pray for those who persecute them. This reflects God's perfect love, which is extended to all, regardless of their actions. Charitable giving, prayer, and fasting, Matthew chapter 6, verses 1 to 18. Jesus warns against hypocrisy in religious practices, emphasizing that these acts should be done with pure motives, seeking only God's approval rather than human praise. Given to the needy. When given to the poor, it should be done in secret, not with showy gestures to gain the admiration of others. Prayer. Jesus criticizes long, performative prayers meant to impress others. Instead, he provides the Lord's Prayer as a model. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. This prayer emphasizes reverence for God, dependence on him for daily needs, the importance of forgiveness, and protection from evil. Fasting. Like giving in prayer, fasting should be done privately, not to gain attention. It is a personal act of devotion to God, not something to be flaunted. Trust in God and wealth, Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 to 34. Jesus speaks about the dangers of materialism and the importance of trusting God for provision. Treasure in heaven. Jesus warns against storing up treasures on earth, which are temporary and vulnerable to decay or theft. Instead, he encourages investing in heavenly treasures, which are eternal. No one can serve two masters. Jesus points out the impossibility of serving both God and money. Followers must choose where their loyalty lies. Do not worry. Jesus teaches that worrying about material needs like food, drink, and clothing is unnecessary because God knows and provides for our needs. He illustrates this with the birds of the air and the lilies of the field, which do not labor or worry, yet God sustains them. His followers are called to seek first the kingdom of God, trusting that everything else will fall into place. Judging others in self-reflection, Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 to 6. Jesus cautions against hypocrisy in judgment. Before judging others, people should first examine their own faults. He uses the vivid metaphor of the person with a log in their eye, trying to remove a speck from someone else's eye. This teaches humility and self-awareness. Jesus isn't forbidding discernment, but he warns against harsh, hypocritical judgment. The golden rule, as found in Matthew chapter 7, verse 12, is one of the most famous moral teachings of Jesus. It says, "So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you." This encapsulates the heart of ethical living and fulfills the law and the prophets. In Matthew chapter 7, verses 13 to 27, Jesus shares his final parables and exhortations. He begins with the narrow and wide gates, comparing two paths, the wide gate that leads to destruction and the narrow gate that leads to life. Few find the narrow way, indicating that true discipleship requires commitment and often goes against the grain of society. Next, Jesus talks about a tree and its fruit. He warns about false prophets, teaching that people will recognize them by their fruits. Good trees produce good fruit, and bad trees produce bad fruit. To conclude, Jesus shares the parable of the wise and foolish builders. He compares those who hear his words and act on them to a wise man who builds his house on a rock. When the storms come, the house stands firm. Those who ignore his words are like a foolish man who builds on sand, whose house collapses in the storm. The Sermon on the Mount is revolutionary, offering a vision of a transformed heart and life. It invites people to embrace humility, love, and dependence on God. Rather than mere outward obedience, Jesus calls for a deeper, inward righteousness, motivated by love for God and others. Please like, comment, and subscribe to help us grow our spiritual channel. Thank you.